coming.
I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate it.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself? This is your Republican candidate for the 1st Congressional District, held by John Larson. A fairly ambitious undertaking you've got here. So your first run for office?
It is. It's my first public office.
Yes. So A, why run? And B, why aim so high, taking on the chairman of the Democratic caucus?
Other than the simple answer, you've got to start somewhere. But now let me take a step back. I'll tell you what really led me to run, and maybe you'll understand why I'm stepping up the way I believe I am. First off, I never envisioned myself a politician. This was not something I envisioned myself when I was growing up or ever really even wanted to be. And in many ways, I think it's almost a shame I have to be here speaking with you, and the fact that the only reason I'm here is because I don't believe our politicians on both sides are really representing us. They're failing us. Our government is failing us. And I started to speak up about it a little bit. And as I spoke up, I was said, you should consider running for office. And I was like,
where would you speak up about something like that?
With like a lot of clients, business owners, individuals I work with. As a certified financial planner, I work with about 44 companies in their retirement plans. And I talk to a lot of employees about saving for why they need to save for their, not what a 401k plan is, that's easy to do, but more why they need to do it. How they have to take responsibility and invest in themselves. Okay. And I start to talk a little bit about the economy, why they need to do this, and you hear their frustrations. And I know the numbers and the debt and the deficit and what we go into debt a day, $4.9 billion a day, how unsustainable it is. I mean, we celebrated a school in East Hartford Glassmere, the new magnet school that opened up on last Tuesday. It's $37 million a day. You can build 130 of those schools with what we spend a day, going into debt. So I just started talking about the numbers and how unsustainable they were. And what really made it resonate was in the spring of 2009, after Obama was initiated, he passed his stimulus bill. And I got a postcard in the mail, much like each of you probably did, congratulating you that you'd soon be receiving your stimulus check, and when you did, to go out and spend it to save America. And I knew, based on, because of the AGI numbers, adjusted gross income, that my wife and I were not going to be eligible. We both decided to work. And so I looked at this postcard, and not only was it insulting that we would be the type of individuals that would actually go take that stimulus check and spend it. I mean, if I got a check for $2,100 from the government, $600 for each taxpayer, $300 per child, we don't have any financial debt. We don't have credit card debt. Our cars are paid for. My car's 12 years old, as a matter of fact. We're fiscally conservative. We save for our kids' college education and in our 401k and 457 plans. But yet we're going to be excluded from receiving this check when we're the type of family that would have bought a bike for our kids or taken a trip to Disney World and actually spend it to save America. So I was a little bit frustrated at first, personally frustrated, because I wasn't going to get the stimulus check even though we pay our taxes.
Are you suggesting those who did get them weren't going to spend them?
Well, I was actually going to answer that for you on that. And so I started, that's exactly what I did, is I started asking individuals as I was doing these meetings. I said, did you get your stimulus check? And they'd all say yes. I said, what are you going to do with that check? And they said that the three most common responses that I received were they're going to save it because they're worried about losing their job, they're going to pay their past due heating oil bill, or they're going to pay down their credit card debt. None of that was going to take care of the economy, stimulate America. It was just going to add to our nation's debt. So I pointed this out in my letter to President Obama. And I further went into, expanded it into what we could do if we wanted to qualify for the stimulus check. And I started talking about, well, let's assume my wife quits working. If she quits working, and I pulled out our actual tax returns and put into, what she made and how much she paid and exact dollars to the penny, what she made and if she quit her job, what that would mean. Well, she'd pay, $30,000 left in federal income taxes, and the state would receive $6,000 less. And we would fire our nanny, who now is an unemployed single mom of two. And obviously we're going to try to maintain to live the same cost of living or style of living that we have. So we would have less discretionary income because we have one less income. So we were not going to be able to give to our church or our foundations, our Salvation Army, or our universities, all the money we did. And I itemized that out. And I finally said that basically what you're doing is you're taking away the incentive to work and be hard and be successful. And I enclosed a copy of Aesop's fable, Killing the Golden Goose. I said, this is what you're doing to middle-class families by excluding them and making us seem like we're the Bill Gates or the Warren Buffetts of the world. We're not in that $1 million salary. We're not that multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar class.
Oh, it's in the middle class. Where does that?
That's one of my kind of pet peeves is the way we try to divide America. The low income or middle class, the wealthy, whatever it is. we're all in this together. This is our country, and we all work together. The middle class.
I just was reacting because you said that that's
Well,
killing the
I was using that
golden
because that's
goose,
what. Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think the middle class is the average American that lives in a home and tries to raise a family. I know it's easy to stereotype it by salary or income thresholds only, but I think it's real America. It's the companies that try to get by and raise a family and do what's right, save for their retirement, prepare for their kids' education, and if you want to probably put in a salary, maybe it's $70,000 to $400,000, $500,000, somewhere in there.
That would be middle class?
What's that? $70,000, $50,000, probably the starting class. Yes, $70,000 to a couple $100,000. Yes, I would say so.
Then middle class is kind of a mythic aspect to it.
That's
almost.
correct. That's right.
It's not just. It's sort of how you think about it, not necessarily where your income is registers in.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, people try to stereotype individuals too easily, and they want to use whatever demographic they can, whether it be by race or religion or salary or AGI, whatever it is. That's the wrong way to do it. We're all in this together. And I think it's wrong to say because you make this, well, let's say if we make $200,000 and we have 3 kids and we have a nanny that's working for us and we hire her, or we pay a babysitter, or we pay aftercare, daycare, and we save for their college education, and there's a couple that lives across the street that has no children, and they're making the same amount of money, are they rich or are we in the same category? I mean, I would say they have tons more disposable income, but we're going to be qualified the same because our AGI is the same. That's not right. I mean, again, that's why numbers or anything, it's not easy to put people in classes. But anyway, so I'm sorry.
Oh, so I just want to just kind of circle back a little bit. I mean, every office holder should be challenged, and I congratulate you on doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if change can be affected more easily at the ground level, and given that the state legislature is majority Democratic
Mm-hmm.
at both the House and the Senate level, would you be more effective trying to get a seat there?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think that experience as far as being a politician should be the sole determining factor. If you want to talk about involvement in the community, I mean, I'm a treasurer and deacon of my church, right down the street, one of the largest churches in Hartford. I'm also on the board of directors for the Mandel Jewish Community Center. I'm on the board of directors for Business for Downtown Hartford. I coach youth sports. I'm going through the Quest programs. I'm at Leadership Greater Hartford, where I touch tons of nonprofit organizations and meet great people in the community. These are things I think that better prepare me to be a politician and vote what's best for this district than saying I was a mayor in a town and then I worked for the state central. I don't think that,
affecting public policy is what I'm saying.
But what I'm saying is, I think I'm closer to the needs of the individuals in the district by doing what I do, by being on these boards, by being a deacon of the church, by coaching sports, talking to parents every day, than being, at State Central, again, making decisions which I think might be best. I talk to real people.
Church?
Asylum Hill Congregational.
Asylum
Hill. I've been a member there for a long time. I was actually just on the search committee. We brought a great new minister in. So, but again, I talk to a lot of people through various experiences, being in the community, trying to make a difference already.
Mm-hmm. So you've described yourself as a redneck from Oklahoma.
Well, that was a joke taken out of context.
Right.
And I thought about correcting you all and sending something in on that.
Yeah.
What that was I've never run for political office. And I don't speak in front of large groups. I speak in front of like a lot of employees at times. But to go out in front of 1,800 people there for the first time and realizing what I had just done. I mean, I beat a very good candidate who was a 3-term town councilor and 2-term board of ed, Mike McDonald, very nice person, very personal individual. And I was a little bit overwhelmed that, wow, I actually did this. Because when I said I was going to do this, again, I didn't have the political experience as far as the public office. He came from that arena. And I was a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, I was worried about being overwhelmed, walking up there and getting emotional and thanking my wife and Mike and seeing my kids there with me. And I was just like, I got to start with something that makes me a little bit more lighthearted, something that gets a break. So I said, do y'all know what you did just, your friends in the 1st District just nominated a redneck from Oklahoma. And that was kind of my break into it, because I did. I went to school at University of Oklahoma.
That's fine with me. I don't care. You can be a redneck. No, I was just curious.
I'm not a redneck, but I do think that, I've spent so many time. I've lived in the city. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I've lived in the inner city. We've moved around a lot. I lived in the country. I mean, so look at the distinction of the demographics in the 1st Congressional District. You've got the inner city, where you have violent crime. I've been stabbed and mugged. I'm a violent victim. I almost died.
Really?
Yeah, I almost died. What's that? This is in 1991. I went home for Thanksgiving, and I was actually in the streets of Baltimore, and I was mugged and knife went into my chest and missed my heart by half an inch, punctured my lung, broken nose, everything. So, I mean, I've been a victim of violent crime. I've lived out in the country, so I think I have a lot of life experiences to offer the voters, and being active within the community brings it all together. I don't think you have to be an attorney or you have to be a career legislator to be successful. I mean, that's why I'm not running for Senate. Not only could I compete with the money or anything like that, but a representative is supposed to represent an individual right there in that community, that immediate community. And I think we need to get back to the Citizens Congress, someone that's from the community.
Well, I was sort of getting at if your out-of-state Republican point of view, how it meshes with Connecticut's kind of the sort of the idea of the Connecticut Republican. I mean, where are you in sync with that, and where might you?
It's hard to say. I mean, I'm definitely fiscally conservative. I think that goes from being a financial planner. I think it knows understanding the debt and how much we spend and how much we waste. I'm probably more socially moderate. There's no secret that Asylum Hill is a big proponent of an open and affirming church. And, I was on the search committee, and that was something when we looked for a minister that would accept our open and affirming statement. So when it comes to, gay marriage, I mean, again, that's a personal religious, freedom that individuals should have. I don't think it's mine as an individual, let alone our government right to say who can get married. I mean, that's a personal freedom.
Well, that's interesting. Could you just go down that path a little bit more and talk
Sure.
about abortion rights? Where are you on that?
I've got to imagine that's going to be one of the hardest decisions an individual's ever going to face. And I've got to believe that is a decision that's best left that individual. I mean, again, it's not a decision that I should say what you should do, the government should say what you should do. There's always going to be extenuating circumstances, and I don't believe that I have a right to say that. It's really what I would prefer to say is like pro-life, pro-choice. Is it her choice? It is her choice. Let her decide that. It's too much of a personal, intimate issue that a government body should say it. And if they were going to do it, at least leave it to the states and let the states decide it. Do I think there should be some restrictions as far as late term or parental notification on a minor? Perhaps. I definitely understand that, because I mean, you just can't make a mistake and have an abortion occur and then let the child go back into that same without learning or talking to their parents. So maybe there should be some kind of parental consent or someone, counselor or something, that helps the child, at least so that they're not in that same situation. But again, I believe it's her choice.
Interesting. Okay.
You say that. Why you always think everything's? Are you surprised by that, or because I don't fit the mold, or?
Well, I haven't heard you talk about that, so I was curious why that hadn't come up in the.
Interestingly enough, you're the first one to actually ask me about it, as far as where I am on as far as the social issues. But like I said, I'm socially moderate. It's very important. But yeah. I think because of how bad the economy is, how much people really look. When I go to talk to people individually, I'm not hearing the social issues. What I'm hearing is about, what do you think about the economy? How can I get a job? We're barely getting by. Those are the issues, at least today, when I'm talking to the voters and the people out there in this district, that's what's coming up first. It's not the disqualifier, of where are you on abortion, or where are you on gay marriage, or whatever social issue you want to put in there. It's more personal than that, because I think the economy is such a big thing right now.
What would you do for the economy?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things to do. I mean, if you first have to look at the economy as a full economic cycle. And the economy entails so many things. I mean, it's not just unemployment and jobs. And we're going to know a lot more, on Friday, September 7th, when we get a new unemployment number. The economy includes unemployment, jobs, it's our nation's debt, it's our deficits, it's consumer confidence, consumer spending, it's even personal pride. If you don't have a job, how are you going to hold your family? There's so many things that are important in the economy. A growing economy will solve so many of these problems. We have to grow our economy, because look at the economic cycle. If you have a growing economy, more people are working. As more jobs are being created, the unemployment rate is going to drop. Consumer confidence is going to increase. People have more disposable income. They're going to start spending. Companies are going to notice this. They're going to start hiring and producing more. You're going to have more people working. That alone, by more people working, you're going to have more revenues to the government, which is going to take care of our deficit, our $1.3 trillion deficit each year.
Kind of a chicken and egg issue, though.
It truly is.
So
it truly is. So what's the big hindrance?
How do we get the chicken to lay the egg, I suppose?
Well, the government has laid the egg, I think, in some things. So, that's part of the problem. But we've got to really, in a lot of ways, I think, get the government out of the way. We've got to go back to letting innovators and entrepreneurs and small businesses be able to invest in their vision. Let them know they can be successful in starting a business. get the regulations out of the way. I mean, even last summer, the White House Chief of Staff, William Daley, told his cabinet members, saying, stop bringing in new excessive regulatory burdens because it's slowing economic growth. And, you know, regulations are necessary. I mean, you have to have some guidance and laws, much like why you have security and police officers, et cetera, to protect the public, and you have rules. But you can't have too many regulations. And maybe even individually they may look good, but when you put regulation after regulation after regulation, it gets burdensome, and that's where it gets overbearing. So I think, you know, that's one way that we've got to slow down the regulations. I mean, there have been 200.
Do you have an
regulations?
example? An example?
Dodd-Frank is a great one. I would start Dodd-Frank. I mean, Dodd-Frank is a 2,300-page bill with over 400 regulations, only a quarter of 800 regulations, only 200 of which have been written. They're still trying to implement it. They're trying to write what the Volcker rule is. Banks don't even know. It's putting huge compliance things out there, requirements on compliance. And the whole premise, the way it got through, was to eliminate too big to fail. It's done the opposite. It's penalizing the small banks. Walk into any small community bank and ask to talk to the compliance officer or CFO. Look at their files for applications for loans versus, you know, where they're reviewing loans. It's gone the reverse thing. They're so burdened by the compliance, and they don't have the cost structure to absorb new compliance officers like the large companies. So the large companies are benefiting the most from this.
Well, was Dodd-Frank not needed at all? They didn't need to address the financial world after what happened?
Well, you have to obviously address the financial world and concerns from that. I mean, I come from the financial world. I'm a certified financial planner, as you've heard. But you just can't, you know, just try to completely take over a whole industry. Let alone, you can't put a 2,300-page bill in without the actual rules with it. How do you operate as a business in a world where the rules aren't even written?
Well, that's sometimes the way laws work.
Right, but why do we accept that as citizens, as individuals? Why do we let our government do that to us? Why do we let our government put rules in that don't always make sense?
Well, I mean, in this case, banks ran wild, and
they did.
And you know, they needed. There apparently was a need for some regulation, and it was The Big Short. You know, they were creating.
But look how. Did you ever read the Big Short by Michael?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm partway through it.
All right, I was going to say
it right now.
It's an awesome book, and
really
when you
is.
get through it, you'll
it's
see what happened.
incredible,
And what banks did is bank took provision that was created by the Community Reinvestment Act in 1998, and they learned how to game it from that. So you had once again another government regulation or law that is great in principle. That everyone should be able, who wants to buy a home should get a home, right? It's kind of like Obama. Everyone should have insurance. I absolutely agree with that. Everyone should have a home. It's a great premise. Is it practical in theory? No, because what happened? Banks started, because they had to make certain loans, started giving these no-doc loans, and loans they never would have made under different regulations. And then they had to shift the risk, and they put them in these tranches, as you learn all about these tranches, these CMOs and CDOs.
Yep.
And then they sell that. And because they're broken in so many pieces, they got ratings on it. They could sell this AAA when they weren't. They were junk. And there are some people that were wonderfully brilliant that saw the whole scam in this, and they went the other side of it, and they started going on the credit default swaps.
That was
right.
The Big Short.
and people don't understand how this all worked. But it started with a government regulation. You had excessive lending with low interest rate environment because of what the Federal Reserve did back then. You had banks repackaging this risk. You had rating agencies put this at AAA, and then you had banks out there kind of self-insuring, thinking it would never go bankrupt or blow up because it was AAA. A couple people figured it out, and that's why the book is amazing. I mean, it's not an easy read, but to take the time and read it, it's almost should be required reading for any political science or economics class.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it does speak to the need for some government regulation.
Absolutely does. Absolutely. I see. I'm not all pro-business or all pro-government. I think there has to be a combination of both, and I think they have to work together. And that's what we're not seeing in Washington. Look at the partisanship; they can't even agree on the simplest things these days. I mean, look no further than the budget last summer. In fact, my opponent John Larson is the one that proposed a super committee, right? He proposed a super committee. We were at a $14.4 trillion deficit or debt last year. We're actually going to hit $16 trillion probably as we sit here today. We're going to hit $16 trillion today. They were trying to cut the national debt by $1.2 trillion over 10 years, and they couldn't agree. Yet we go into debt $4.9 billion a day. They've got to come together. And I'll tell you this too, and this may surprise you. You may say interesting too, is that I'll be the first to tell you, you cannot solve our national debt. You cannot get rid of our deficit. You cannot return this economy around simply by cutting spending. And you can't do the same by raising taxes alone. It needs a combination, and you need to get rid of the regulations. You need to look at when regulations are implemented, does this make economic sense? Review the bills. I mean, there have been 200 regulations put in Obama since he's been inaugurated that have cost over $100 million each, 7 of them over $1 billion. We need to look at the economic impact of these bills. We need to come together and look at everything: taxes, spending, and government spending and waste.
Well, actually, okay, there was a series of questions from the Wall Street Journal, and one of them I thought was pretty interesting. I thought you might find it interesting.
All right.
Will the middle class have to bear some of the burden, either in higher taxes or fewer government benefits, to bring the federal deficit under control?
You know, at some point, we're probably all going to have to. And the way I think I'd answer that question is, look at the greatest generation is always revered for making the difficult choices and doing what was hard, right? And we look back, how they went to war and they won the war. At some point, our generation is going to have to be looked upon as doing the same difficult choices. Maybe we'll have our own fiscal war, that we're going to have sacrifices in here, because failure to do so is this country is going to blow up. And again, I talked to too many, going through the Quest program was one of the best things I've ever done, because I talked to these communities and these small nonprofits. Latino Community Services, they just lost $30,000 federal grant. And they use that for HIV testing and awareness of the neighborhood. There's a neighborhood homework association in West Hartford that lost a $20,000 grant. The director there is now literally picking up water bottles on the side of the road, trying to raise every nickel they can to keep that going. And if you don't have that homework association going after school, these kids are going to get lost in the system, because it goes to a nice structured area where they can do homework, learn, and continue to advance in school. Otherwise, they might drop out. So if we don't get our fiscal house in order, down the road, we're going to have huge consequences. And there are going to be sacrifices, yes, difficult decisions. But you know what? I guarantee you, as individuals, each of you at some point during the last 3 or 4 years, you've given something up. You've made a difficult choice as a family, as an individual, maybe even as a business owner, for those that are out there, that have cut back a little bit and made a difficult choice. Would I love to take my family to Disney World every year? Absolutely. Does it economically make sense? No. But that we have to make those choices, and we have to be responsible. Our government has gone 1,224 days without a budget. Imagine running your own house without balancing your checkbook for 3 years, or running a business without having a budget for 3 years.
So what kind of shared burden bearing, tax-wise, should we do? Where do you see taxes going up on which segment? How would you see this? Would you lower taxes on them? Which would you raise them? What would the middle class share do?
For right now, the number one thing for businesses, and again, I don't know how much you're actually in the community talk to business. Yesterday, you had a great article that talked about 4 individuals, from Hartford, East Hartford, Wethersfield, and Berlin, all lost their jobs. They've been their employees for the last 3 years and lost their jobs. If you talk to these companies that are laying people off, they're cutting back and making things, making the difficult decisions. As individuals, we're going to have that same choice and problem too. Where taxes are going to have to be, I would keep them there right now, because those businesses that cut back are cutting back because of the uncertainties. I wouldn't cut taxes from where they are. I wouldn't raise taxes. I would keep them there. We need to address this fiscal uncertainty that is coming in just 3.5 months right now. That is going to be here before we know it. And it's going to take $500 billion of taxes from the private sector, individuals and businesses, to pay for the increase in Social Security, Obamacare, all the other new taxes that come in. The Bush tax cuts that they want to come are going to expire. What are we going to do with that? Where do we draw that line on cuts? I would keep everything, extend them so businesses can plan. That's what businesses do well. Individuals and families do it. They have a budget, they have goals, they know what they have to do, and they plan based on the numbers and the certainties that they can. Right now, they don't have that. And that's why we're spending trillions and trillions of dollars, yet have the slowest economic recovery, because there's no vision for corporate America or the private sector.
So don't change the tax rates.
I would not change them right now, no.
The greatest generation paid marginal rates of up to 90%.
They did, but there were tons of loopholes, though. Like in 1980,
like now?
Tax shelters. Well, yeah, and Tom, that's a great point. Specifically, if you want to say how we get this economic recovery going, I would probably lower the corporate tax rate and not cut individual rates. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. I would let companies repatriate. They have $2 trillion of overseas. We could bring that money back. And in fact, they did it in 2004. They had a limited window where companies could repatriate their overseas profits that are already taxed in foreign countries. They brought $300 billion back. that came back to companies here for reinvestment, for creating new jobs, building new factories. If we let them leave it over there, they're going to grow over there. They're going to keep that money there, and those jobs are going to stay over there indefinitely. But getting to what you're saying, we have to reform the tax code. We have to simplify the tax code. It is so cumbersome and burdensome right now. I mean, and the worst part about it, it's fundamentally unfair because you have lobbyist influence that picks winners and losers and all these loopholes and carve-outs that we talked about. I mean, when businesses get certain favors versus a competitor, it destroys American ingenuity, that dream of wanting to take a chance and invest in yourself. I mean, I'll give you an example that I saw here in the state, and I know I usually talk a lot more about federal issues, but I was appalled when I saw this, that the state of Connecticut gave a deli in West Hartford Center $50,000 so they could go from a restaurant more to a bar to compete, or make more money in there. And it's a great idea, so they can sell more beer and make more profits. But West Hartford Center is such a viable place. If that company says, you know what, I'm not making enough money here, I'm going to close up, do you know how many more applications they would have? Just want to go put their own money in, invest their own idea, and try to create their own bar in there? Why are the four of us as taxpayers giving that deli $50,000?
That struck us as a little strange.
Right? But and that's I live in West Hartford, so that's one local issue. Extrapolate that across the entire nation on our federal budget. That's what our tax code does. We have to change that.
So, anticipating part two of this question.
All right.
Again,
am I going ahead of myself? I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
If raising taxes would be bad for the economy, how would cutting spending and eliminating government jobs now be good for the economy?
Eliminating government jobs?
Yes, and cutting spending. I mean, where do we find the money?
Again, it depends on the jobs. I mean, look what, again, our own state has been successful in a little bit of attrition, right? They've combined the Department of Energy with the Department of Environment and Protection. You can grow your economy by being smart about it, through attrition, whatever it may be. But be smart about it. You don't just have across-the-board massive layoffs. That's not the answer. Again, I said cutting the spending entirely is not the answer. But being smart about your spending is a different view of that. I mean, if you have a budget, you say, I'm doing my own campaign. I'm not going to be able to compete with John Larson on dollar for dollar, right? So I have to look at every dollar closely on what I can spend. Would I love to have advertising on this company all day long? Absolutely. I can't do it. That's our government needs to look at things differently and not just say we can print dollars. Because one of the worst things our government does to us as individuals when they print dollars is they cause the real inflation rate to go up.
Are they printing more dollars? I hadn't heard that. Is that what was happening? That there's a sort
of
absolutely.
That's what our national debt is. That's why we go from 14.4 trillion debt to 16. We print money we don't have. We borrow 42 cents of every dollar. So let me explain how that works in maybe different terms. When you print money you don't have, you have to get it from somewhere, okay? And that's why we issue treasury bonds, treasury notes, treasury bills. And other countries are buying that. China, Japan, Germany are buying it, okay? Right now, we're very fortunate interest rates are low. They're artificially low right now. And there's other problems with that under the law of unintended consequences for savers. But companies are buying our debt. That debt is going to be due. And we've added $1.6 trillion in the last 13 months. So when you print money, it weakens the value of your dollar. So that's why you're seeing your prices of gas, food, your utility bills all going up. Because, again, the dollar is weaker. You're buying the same thing but paying more for it. And what's so unfortunate about that, particularly when you look at the 1st Congressional District, the 1st Congressional District has one of the lowest household incomes in the nation. I mean, the disparity of income, particularly in the greater Hartford area, in Hartford itself, is so low. You only have so much disposable income. So if you're paying more for your gas, all of a sudden you have less money to buy food and other things that you need to do. I mean, gas is such a regressive price, and when you increase that, or food, you have to have food. You have to buy these things to live or get around. And when they go up in real money, that's where it gets difficult.
Are those really part of the credit situation, those increases? I mean, the dollar, there's been no risk of inflation for the last several years, and the
that's correct.
The dollar is actually gaining against the euro and other foreign currencies by and
large. And let me explain those individually, because there's a big difference, and it's an important distinction. And I think that's something not only to you, but hopefully everyone will understand, is that there are two ways to look at inflation. There's the inflation rate, which the government tells us, and the real inflation rate. The inflation rate includes everything that you buy. It includes the big one-time purchases, your home, your car, an appliance, or washing machine, for example, okay? We know home prices aren't going up. If anything, they're dropping. Car values, the same thing. Appliances are always discounted. You can see 30-40% regularly off on your appliances, right? Those aren't going up in cost. It's the other items that you buy every day. Real inflation is defined as things that you buy every day less the one-time items. So everything you buy less than one-time items. So the real inflation rate does not include a house or a car or an appliance, where the inflation rate, the government says there's no inflation because it's including the house, which is the largest part of that formula. So housing prices are dropping down. Of course you're not going to have inflation.
I just was getting at whether or not the U.S. is having borrowed a lot of money has actually caused the price of gas to go up and the price of food to go up, or there's other things at work there.
Well, there's definitely other things at work, but it's a big component of it, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would hate to think what happens if we get into a hyperinflationary environment. I mean, we saw it in the 70s.
So would we all, yeah.
Right. But, the way we're printing money, it could happen. I mean, look at any country that has failed in their currency. In my office, I have a copy of the Zimbabwe dollar. They started off with a $10 trillion bill, 20, 50, and then a $100 trillion bill. It then became so worthless that it cost more to print it than it was to actually use it. And, I mean, we need to be cognizant of what we're doing with our dollar. I'm not saying we're going to have to print a $100 trillion bill, but, we just can't keep printing money. All right? That's why it's so important we grow this economy, not just to create jobs and help households and so people can provide for their families, but to get a hold of this debt, because at some point, China or Japan or Germany, whomever it may be, is going to say, you know what, I'm not taking the risk of 2.6% yield on your 30-year treasury anymore, given how much debt you have. It's projected we're going to hit $20 trillion in national debt by 2016. I mean, the interest alone last year, our net total interest on all of our debt was $454 billion. Now, to put that in context, again, that school, the magnet school that opened in East Hartford in Glastonbury on Tuesday, cost $37 million. So if you take, we're at 16 trillion divided by 37, that's about 12,000 schools you could build. I mean, it's unbelievable what's going on. I mean, again, every day we add $4.9 billion a day to our debt. That's 130 schools.
Given that you think that we need to create jobs and all the rest of it, what would Congress do if they let you write the rules? I mean, beyond regulation, I mean, it would seem to me that it's in everybody's interest to put the economy back on track.
It is, but I think politicians, unfortunately, over time, and this is for term limits actually, or would give myself self-imposed term limits if I'm ever fortunate enough to get that far, is that there comes a time when everyone goes in, like myself, I'm in front of you, I've got big eyes, great ambitions, you can probably see the energy, enthusiasm while I'm here, is that at some point I think Washington either fails you or gets corrupted, you get corrupted by it, or you get more worried about self-preservation and being reelected. And that's what's got to change. I think that's why we need to get back to that Citizens Congress. So if I had the opportunity to go in there and make an influence, I'm not saying I'd be doing this by myself, but if I can win in a district like the 1st Congressional District, which again, when you get back to like why this district of all things would you start in, probably one of the toughest races in the nation, I'm going to have a lot of people that are hopefully the same like-minded individuals like myself that aren't set in their own ideological ways, that are going to want to work and try to come together. I mean, it's why I think I can be successful on a search committee with 8 Democrats, 2 Independents, and 2 Republicans, and have the same cause in mind, that we want a great preacher for our church. It's why I can be asked as the only non-Jewish or Gentile individual to go on the board of directors for the Mandel JCC. I like to think I work well with other individuals. I respect outside opinions or those I may disagree with, but I'm not going to shut them out or just flat out say I'm going to dismiss them, because we've got to solve this together, and it needs to be done. So I would try to say, what are the regulations? How can we make it easier for government? I mean, go back to 1940. Do you remember, World War II? Are you a historian at all? Remember what FDR did? I mean, FDR, and I've talked about this before, when we were facing World War II and preparing for it, the drums were beating in World War II, democracies in Europe were falling under Hitler's blitzkrieg. And so it was in May of 1940 when the president of FDR called the president of General Motors, William Knudsen, and he said, I need your help to mobilize for the war. And he actually did that against his own administration, urging him not to do it. His wife, Eleanor, said, don't call, don't reach out. He goes, no, we have to. Because, Bill Knudsen was a master. He's a wizard of mass production. And even though he was a fierce Republican, and he reached out. And so what did he say? He goes, we have to eliminate the government interference. We have to get rid of the anti-business tax climate out of the government. We need to let companies produce what they can produce best. We need to give the military orders directly to the producers and let them produce what they think they can produce best. In essence, he was basically saying we need to get government and its interference out of the way. I would agree with that scenario again today. That's what I would try to do. I would try to make it easier for someone that wants to take a risk and invest their own capital, their own money, and go out and start a business. You're not seeing that innovation today. You're seeing that American dream dying today because they're getting frustrated. Regulations are holding them back. They can't do the compliance. So you've got to make things easier for it to get back to what founded this great country, a capitalistic society. I know it sounds simplistic, but in a lot of ways it is. It's why we were successful in the first 200 years.
It always sounds a little bit like a black box. I mean,
you're right.
We'll just do this and it'll happen. But we've had boom years. I mean, the Clinton years were incredibly strong years.
In the Clinton, that's a great example because they had balances, checks and balances. You had a Democrat president that would work with Republican-led Congress and Senate, and they did very, very well. They balanced the budget. Where's that partisanship today? Where's that leadership today? There's a vacuum of it. It's so polar right now. You have politicians and the vitriol between each other. Nothing gets done. And one of the problems I have with my own representative, why I jumped in this is, he's now the leader. Larson's now the leader, the chairman of the Democrat caucus. So I think he's lost even more of his opportunity to be a voice for this district. So we've got to get more individuals, I think, like myself, I'm biased of course, but that want to really come together and do what's best for this country, to make the personal sacrifice. I mean, I assure you, it would be a lot easier if I were allowed to remain in my job and work with my family and in my community. But I felt called to do this because it has to be done. And we can't continue to accept it because if we don't, things are going to get a lot worse. And like the nonprofit organizations, like I told you earlier, that are losing their federal grants, when they have to shut down and all these people are lost on the street, when the South Park Inn has to shut down, they go find the 85 people underneath the underpasses here in Hartford and bring them in for a night and give them food and clothing and then let them go in the morning. They're not going to be around. And what happens then? What happens to our society? We can't let that fail.
Is the South Park Inn in some danger of shutting down?
I'm using it as an example. It's another wonderful organization. But have they had budget cuts? Absolutely. Go talk to Dick and ask him how tough it's been for them to get by day to day. Absolutely. Ask any nonprofit that is on bare bones budget right now, that's cutting by, making the sacrifice, again, collecting water bottles versus what our government is doing. Again, real organizations like those, real families like that are making these decisions every day. Our government isn't. And that's the whole point. And that's why I'm running, because I recognize how unsustainable our current direction is. And I simply wanted to, I don't want to look back 8-10 years from now when I said, when someone said, John, you should consider running for Congress. And I said, no, I can't do it. I'm too busy. I'm too blessed. My life's too good. Why disrupt it? Why put my life on hold when I had a chance to try to speak up and make a difference? And to me, I don't want to be that person who looks back and say, I didn't do it when I had a chance.
So as a compassionate person, what do you do about, 40 million uninsured? And was the Affordable Health Care Act, was that a mistake?
Well, it's not a simple answer because it's not a simple thing. But let me start by saying that the premise of providing health insurance for every individual, for every American, is a wonderful idea. In fact, something I would fully embrace. But it was also supposed to have two parts to it. It was supposed to provide insurance for every individual while also reducing the cost of rising health care, right? I mean, can we all agree on that? I mean, there are two parts to it. What happened was they basically threw out the concern for rising health care costs. And it became this big grab bag and this monstrous bill that was forced through that even our Supreme Court said it was cruel and unusual punishment to try to read the whole thing. A 2000 bill monstrosity, right? So we have it, and now we know it's a tax, and people are going to be taxed on this thing if they don't do it. My biggest concern with this thing is the way it was forced upon us, again, taking away some of our personal freedoms, and the way they got it through the Senate and went back to the House, back and forth. But more than that, have you all asked your doctor what the IPAB is, the Independent Payment Advisory Board? Do you even know what this is yet? The next doctor's appointment you have, sit down with your doctor and say, I know Obamacare is passing coming up and it's going to start. What is IPAB? What will that mean for your relationship with me if I come down with a disease or cancer in the future and how you treat me? Because if you haven't done that, you need to ask that question right now.
Is a rationing board of some kind? Is that?
It is, well, you can call it rationing. Others have called it death panels, rationing, whatever you call it. It is a board of 15 bureaucrats that are appointed, a minority of which are only from the healthcare community, that will determine what type of care or if you qualify for certain treatments. It is taking the decision-making process away from you and your doctor. When you used to sit in that consultation room and the doctor says, listen, here's the problem. You have this test came back this. What are my options? Well, the board says you can only do this based on your age or this is where you are. That's not the way, my father had prostate cancer. My mom's had breast cancer. I get tested and screened for prostate cancer every year. Because I know, unfortunately, because my grandfather had it, it's probably going to be in me too. I want to be able to have the same options that my father had or my grandfather had. My grandfather was old enough, fortunately, they said, you know what, you'll probably die natural. He died at 93. He died, had a long death. He developed it at 87. So they said you'll probably outlive it before it becomes serious. My dad had numerous treatments, radical removal, chemotherapy, radiation, whatever it may be. I may not have those based on what this is.
You may not, but you may, and those decisions are being made today by insurance companies.
Right.
So why shouldn't a sort of medical scientific board be empowered to make those sorts of decisions?
But
with
it's
the
not
best
a medical
science at
scientific
hand?
board. At maximum, only 5 individuals can be those, medical scientists. You're going to have just everyday people, people from finance or economics or whatever it may be. But it's written in there, only minority representation can be from the medical field. And that's specifically put in there, maybe to take away the compassion or the cost, whatever it may be, I don't know. But it's written in there that only a minority can be from the medical field.
Okay.
But the IPAB, to me, is one of the best probably things that people need to have to alert themselves on. I mean, it is so important to understand what that is. And it's just an independent payment advisory board. Not only that, and this is the whole problem where I'd actually probably repeal Obamacare, because if it's not repealed Obamacare, that IPAB is in the system forever. I mean, there is a limited window in 2017 and another little opening in 2020, and outside of that, it's there. These people aren't elected. They're not accountable to anyone.
Well, how would you have restrained healthcare spending then?
Well,
Healthcare costs?
Again, I'm about competition, supply and demand. Why didn't we try other things first? Why didn't we allow health insurance policies to be sold across state lines? Why do we have to have one insurance policy for every single state? Auto insurance is sold across state lines. Why not health insurance? Okay, why not look at the real costs of rising healthcare costs? Why not look at tort reform? Some of the tests that may be unnecessary because they're worried about litigious lawsuits. I mean, there are other things that could have been done. Again, one of my responsibilities, I believe, in running for Congress is to try to speak with as many individuals in each area and get their input. And when I talk with doctors about some of the things in Obamacare and the way it was rushed through and done, again, this bill was just put together and rushed through. And there's so many bad things in there that it concerns me about being able to have, again, making personal decisions for my own health. The premise was great. I think it was done incorrectly.
Are there parts of it you like, though?
Yeah, giving insurance to everyone's a great idea. I mean, people have to have it. Preventive care, extending people with pre-existing conditions. I mean, if my best friend lost a son who died from leukemia at 15, I know how many medical bills he had. He was fortunate that he had a great insurance plan. If he didn't have that, he would have been wiped out because he spent over $1 million on medical treatment for 8 months in the hospital before he succumbed to it, okay? So there are things that need to be in there, pre-existing conditions. People have bad backs or whatever it may be, and you hit these income thresholds. So yes, there are some great things in there, but you also have to let the companies that write policies be able to, account for these expenses. It's much like if you say, no one should have an automobile deductible anymore. Well, what does that mean for my insurance rates? Well, they're probably going to go up. You can't say you can't raise insurance rates, but you have to cover all this because they're not going to make it. They're all going to fail, and we're all going to be back in the government now.
Well, can it be amended rather than ended?
Parts of the thing cannot be amended. I mean, this IPAB is in there unless you repeal the whole thing, the IPAB.
I'm curious at how, you're saying that the insurance companies can't be forced to cover everything if they have limits on them, but at the same time, with new medicine is inventing new stuff all the time.
Absolutely.
And it's more and more expensive. And the question is there a point at which somebody should dispassionately look at that spending on a case-to-case level?
The IPAB doesn't allow that, though. I mean, that's what's so great about our country is we have some of the best medical innovation in the world, but there's costs associated with that. This bill, because of what's allowed and treated, you're not going to have that innovation anymore. So a treatment that we can't even envision today, which might be available in 10 years, may never even get the chance to get started again because it won't be reimbursed.
Well, you just assume they're going to reject everything? Is that sort of where you start?
No, but I'm saying there's going to be a lot of limits. No, and I would hope not because, I mean, there are wonderful drugs that come on the way. But, I mean, again, if you talk to the creators of medical technology and the companies that work with it, they're severely concerned about basically having it shut down.
Do you want to move on to foreign policy?
Whatever you want, absolutely.
Great. Do you support troops out of Afghanistan? Was the war a mistake in the first place?
No, I don't think the war was a mistake in the first place, but yes, I would have them out of there. And the reason being is I think once you have an administration or a president that says, we are not going to give them everything that they need. They need to come home. You know, if you look at the surge that was requested in Afghanistan when they wanted 40,000 troops, President Obama waited for a couple months, and he sent 30,000. It has been declining since that day. We have had over 2,000 troops die in Afghanistan. Over 70% of those troops have died since Obama's been inaugurated. And it's because we're not giving them the resources they need. They should have come home that day, the day he said he didn't want to give them everything they needed. So no, I would not be there.
Now, how would that have protected our security to take them out the day that he was inaugurated? How would?
No, it wouldn't. But you can't have our soldiers over there helpless. You have to give them everything they need. When you commit to a war, when you put troops' lives in danger, you need to give them what they need. Or you say, you know what, if we're not committed to this war, we're going to bring them home. It's not worth fighting. And that's a quandary this president put himself in when he responded. He was late to send the troops and the number he wanted, and then the next day said we're going to take them out by this date. And he made him out sitting deadline, just out there right now, trying to police us. And you've got things that are turning against us right now. And we're sending drones across indiscriminately. And for every one, Taliban or terrorist we're taking out, we have collateral damage. We're creating a couple more because their cousins or brothers are being killed. I mean, it's a tough thing. But I mean, special ops might have been a better way to take out terrorists than just sending drone attacks after drone attacks. We're losing military intelligence and we're killing other people. I mean, it's a tough thing. I agree with that. But you either have to give your troops everything they need, or you pull them back. And I think that he was caught in the middle of the two.
So, what about the trouble in Syria? Should we be involved with that?
I probably would advocate enforcing a no-fly zone, at least in the northern part of the border, so the rebels couldn't continually get bombed by Syrian air forces. No-fly zones, it would be pretty, it'd be difficult. But I mean, as far as putting troops on the ground, I think it'd be a much better solution. It's something we're going to have to watch very, very closely because, again, you've got Iranian diplomats and their Republican Guard in there, and basically their weaponry, feeding the Assad regime, and it's going to collapse at some point. It's a matter of when, but I don't think we should be watching thousands and thousands of citizens die, as we sit back and watch it.
So no fly zone for the time.
I mean that would stop the air assaults and the mass
we
casualties.
Supply them the rebels or with weapons. We know who they are.
Well, that's the problem. Do we truly know who they are? I mean, we probably have an indication. If we could identify that, and we had the full intelligence, and I'm not here to say that I had the intelligence access that they do, but yeah, we probably should, arm them. But again, we did the same thing in Afghanistan. Didn't we arm the rebels in Afghanistan against the Soviets?
Long ago, you mean? Yes.
Yeah, we did, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they defeated the Soviets, but I mean, some of those same, missiles and weapons, and it started the same kind of, things against us too. It's not easy, is what I'm saying.
The last country over there we talk about usually is Iran.
Yeah.
Them developing.
This will probably be the scariest development in our generation that we'll have to deal with. No one wants to see a nuclear war, and you've got a country, Iran, that has already declared that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They've already faced one Holocaust. They're not going to go through a second Holocaust, and we have to be more supportive. When the Joint Chief of Staff last week says that, when he tells diplomats that, Israel will have to be complicit against their actions if they bomb Iran, what message are we sending to Israel? It appalls me that we are limiting Israel's options and telling them to be complicit and not wholeheartedly standing by them. It shows us as weak. I think we, again, I told you earlier I'm on the board of directors for the Mandel JCC, so I'm influenced because I talk to people there about it and I'm asked about it. But we just can't simply let a nation be blown away.
So do you think Obama's approach to Iran is too weak?
No, I think his approach is insincere in that he's hoping that this is my personal opinion, I think he's hoping this does not become a political issue and he can get it past the election and he'll decide what he wants to do. He doesn't want to deal with this right now during the election because it is a difficult decision. It is something that I don't think you can just hope that goes by in time. It's becoming progressively worse. The rhetoric is continually getting worse. The threats are getting worse, and it's something we're going to have to deal with. And I was fortunate as a child being born in 1967, not really having the fear of nuclear war. I wasn't around for the Cuban Missile Crisis and having to cover under desks. And I wear my kids now because if they do get a nuclear bomb and they export it, where does that go? And the delivery systems are so much greater today. So it's something that has to be done with. Now, the Mossad and our intelligence, they know a lot more about it than we'll ever know. Even if I were elected, I'd have to differ a long, long time to have privy to even half of what they know. But I've got to believe that the intelligence are watching very closely. What bothers me the most is the actions that we are taking, the cyber wars, the counterinsurgency is getting leaked out. I mean, how are we letting them know what we're doing? I mean, that's something we should read in a history book 50 years from now. We shouldn't be reading in your paper saying that, that we launched some kind of a worm that shut down a nuclear, the centrifuges from not being refined. I mean, we shouldn't, again, that should be something in a history book years down the road on how we stop the Iranian development of nuclear weapons.
Okay. On that.
What time is it? Have we been here for an hour already?
Yeah, we've got a few minutes
All
left.
right,
Is there
good. Whatever you
anything
need.
else you want to let us know about?
I would just say I'm thrilled to be here. If you haven't noticed already, I mean, this is such an honor to have an opportunity to run for Congress. So, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. My father always lived in Connecticut. I come visit here. I went to school at University of Oklahoma, and 16 years ago, my wife and I, unlike a lot of young couples, decided to move back to Connecticut or into Connecticut. We came up here on our own. And it's nice to see the democratic process works. I started voicing my concerns about the direction of this country, and someone said, you should run. And I beat a very good challenger in the convention where I got 70% of the delegates. So it's nice to know the political process does work, and I can come into the state and have an opportunity to do this. And my goal is to really try to represent the district the best I can. And I truly believe that we need someone that is close to the community. I think that's where I almost have an unfair advantage to John Larson. I know he went to Central State. I know he's very active in East Hartford. But I think being down in Washington for 14 years, he's gotten away from that. And again, with all these things that I do every day and being in the community, it's not only an honor to have this, but I think that's where I'm going to be the most successful, because I understand, what it's like to struggle. I understand what it's like to come from an inner city. I understand how companies are barely getting by, how nonprofit organizations are struggling, cutting back everywhere they can to continue to provide the very vital services that they need. And I'm just thrilled to try to speak up for them. So, I really thank you for having me in.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Great.